All right, well, welcome everyone. We are going to go ahead and jump right into this. Laura, if you wouldn't mind continuing to let people into the room as we start, but we only have 45 minutes and I want to give these wonderful authors as much time as possible. So just good evening and welcome. I hope you all have had a wonderful day and have been just infused with good poetry and writing and ideas. Thank you all for joining us for the Airlie Press author reading with authors and editors Brittney Corrigan, Amelia Diaz Ettinger, Jessica Mehta, and Jennifer Perrine. My name is Jen Lynn. I'm the incoming Lit Fuse program director, being handed the Lit Fuse torch from Lauren Westerfield, who is amazing after this weekend. I am presenting this program to you today from Titan. I'm actually in the fueling station, our new headquarters. Wishing you all were here, but next year, before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I, the Lit Fuse staff and Titan Arts and Humanities, acknowledge our presence on the ceded lands of the Confederated Tribes and Bands of the Yakama Nation. And I want to give a thanks to all of you, our faculty, and our generous financial supporters for making this weekend possible. And thank you to Airlie Press and our featured authors tonight. Also, just a quick reminder, please mute your audio throughout the presentation. And then we will have our Airlie authors. Welcome, Airlie Press authors. Airlie Press is a nonprofit publisher out of Portland, Oregon, run by writers dedicated to cultivating and sustaining fine contemporary poetry and to promoting poets from the Pacific Northwest. And now I'd like to introduce to you our first Airlie author, which is Jessica Mehta. Jessica Mehta was born and raised in Oregon and a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, is a multi-award-winning interdisciplinary author, artist, and storyteller. She is currently preparing for her Fulbright U.S. Scholar Award in Bangalore, I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, India, as well as her residency at UCross as the 2021 Native American Artist in Residence. Jessica is currently completing her PhD in literature at the University of Exeter. She has 2 books releasing this year, including When We Talk of Stolen Sisters, Not a Pipe Publishing, and Antipodes, New Rivers Press. Welcome, Jessica Mehta.
Lucia, thank you for having me. I was really torn about what to share tonight, especially since I know we all have, pretty tight windows. Ultimately, I've decided to share something from a somewhat recent project. Right now, I am a virtual fellow / resident at the San Francisco Library's James C. Hormel LGBTQIA+ Center in collaboration with Radar Productions. It's called the Show Us Your Spine residency because, after 3 years of digging in archives, I just didn't get enough. So it was pretty open in what we were going to create as part of this fellowship and residency, but ultimately I ended up writing poems because that's what I do. And there's 2 of them. I don't know if I'll have time for both. So I'm going to start actually with the one that's a little bit longer. Just like a show of hands down there. Does anybody know Beth Brant's Her Name is Helen? Or in chat? It was new to me. So I will give a little brief intro to that. So basically in this project, I am studying the history of I don't love the term two-spirit folks within various tribal communities. So for me, this poem spoke to me because my mother left me over 5,000 photos when she died. And many of these photos are just the little square prints from a photo booth that she frequented after finishing her waitressing shift at what was the only Chinese restaurant in town. My mother was white, her name was Rita, and she married my father, who was a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, just 5 days after meeting him in person, but following years of exchanging letters while he was in prison. So I have lived my entire life feeling that my feet are kind of trailing along in 2 different worlds, native and white, straight seeming or passing and queer, stemming from poverty, and now having dug my way out, but it still just feels so close that I can smell it. So when I read Beth Brant's Her Name is Helen, which was written in the 1980s, It wasn't me or my Aniyanwia father who appeared in my mind's eye, but my mother, which is typically her way. So I wrote my own version of her name is Helen, and it is her name was Rita. Her name was Rita. She came from Maywood, California by way of Arkansas through branching back roads and long rests and truck stops, tucked beside her own mother who plucked stray leg hairs from bony white shins with car tweezers. She ended up in Jacksonville, Oregon, where she lived for 40 years in that old gold rush town where it took pounds of paperwork to change the paint on peeling historic buildings, and no chain restaurants were allowed, not ever. She loved waitressing. She made good money, especially when she was 9 months pregnant with me and kept her wedding ring buried in her apron. She married my dad in Reno when he was hot out of prison and after the halfway house took his shoes. Biggest little city in the world. She wore spandex stretch pants from when they were popular in the 80s all the way until she died, and they, like her, had almost come full circle. Wore button-up shirts with big patches she steam pressed on, couldn't wear heels, what with her bunions and bulges. Rich man's bug, she'd say. Rita took pictures of herself. Every time she passed that photo booth after work, one picture for a dime, and then the prices kept rising. She'd close the curtain and bulbs would pop. When she quit the restaurant after having me, she didn't work again for 15 years, called herself a homemaker, a housewife, tried to become her own mother. Instead of tips, now she got a husband who sometimes didn't come home and a daughter who couldn't wait to get gone. Sometimes my dad would bring home gifts from garage sailing. A big wooden Indian who sat watch in the living room corner. Portraits of some fake chief and his Indian squaw with eyes that followed you everywhere like Jesus. Everybody loved Rita. She could really put on a show when she was up, and honest to God, didn't see color non-racist. After all, she'd married an Indian. Once had even danced with black men passing through on leave. Rita didn't kiss outside of marriage. She begged my father to fuck her when she'd had enough vodka. I know because she told me. She slept with his garage sale nemesis the year after he left us, Jude, who said he'd always wanted her because he wanted everything Daddy had, who thought my mother was a Sunday treasure missed. Rita took pictures of herself. She had a picture on a bracelet locket along with a photo of me, and now the whole chain is in a box I never opened. She used to put that bracelet in her vinyl coin purse. She sounded like loose change moving through the bars, looking for my father every weekend while I ate toast in the car. Daddy never took care of her. No one did, not even me. Nobody told her what to wear, what to say or do, though her mother tried. No darker, Mama said when she first saw my father. Rita never talked much, at least that's how the stories go, but I met her on the other side of illness. Was so shy, didn't talk much except when she'd had enough vodkas and pills, and then she talked about home, about Mama, about the first marriage, about the rape, about wanting to go home to Mama when she's dead. She was always saying she was about to die. She died at 70, 3 years ago now. Rita didn't kiss after her last divorce, didn't talk much to the doctors, still took pictures of herself. She started touching her white self, touched by her own hands. I know because she told me. Rita never believed that she was beautiful, that her hair hung heavy as auburn curtains ablaze in the black, that her thighs were only too thick for the era in which she was delivered, that her perfect teeth cut through the deepest kernels of disease, that her smile is only one eye gleam in catches of shadows, one that cannot be outdone by me or anyone. I'm a goddamn apple. Getting a little fat there, aren't you? I hate my arms. This is what Rita said. She wore a polka dot shirt with a patch of roses, not stitched, but pressed across large breasts, her breasts that only men and me had stretched and shaped to fit our mouths. Rita couldn't imagine that there was anyone who saw her, that there were always those who wanted to eat her, body and beyond, who wanted to create a movement amidst her thighs, who wanted to delve to the depths of her, unearth the spaces that were blinking and dormant, heart and spirit, who wanted to love her, make two bodies into a universe uncontainable. Rita never believed that she was beautiful. She never kissed outside of marriage, didn't talk much before me, took pictures of herself so she could archive her aliveness, took pictures of herself to prove she was here. Rita took pictures of herself. And my time is up.
Thank you so much for that, Jessica. It was beautiful. Next up, we have Amelia Diaz Ettinger. She's a Mexican Rican, born in Mexico, but raised in Puerto Rico. A BIPOC poet and writer. She has 2 full-length poetry books published: Learning to Love, A Western Sky by Airlie Press, and a bilingual poetry book, Speaking at a Time, Hablando a la Vez by Red Bat Press, and a poetry chapbook, Fossils and a Red Flag by Finishing Line Press in 2021. Her poetry and short stories have appeared in literary journals and anthologies. Presently, Amelia is working on an MFA in creative writing at Eastern Oregon University in La Grande, Oregon. Welcome.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you everybody for being here. What a wonderful day this has been. I actually finished my MFA. I graduated this summer. I want to read a couple of poems out of my book from Airlie Press, Learning to Love, A Western Sky. And I chose 2 poems to read tonight based on the season. Autumn is my favorite time of year. And since we are close to November, I want to read Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, November 1st and 2nd. Dia de los Muertos. Dew covers this grace day. Light struggles to reach ground, but coal has no trouble filling space with living remains. Coal whispers its name at night in the coyote's call. At dawn, the bugling elk, the slowing heartbeat of a dying friend. Autumn of fog, the meadow covered by smoke, screen of images so real, father and child in an eternal dance. Their forlorn silence tastes of mold, incense, and marigolds. There are no altars this far north, no carpets of yellow petals to lead your way. Could you find your way back to me? Cold then becomes my friend, a blue endearing hand that sits on my shoulder as yours once did. Dew now descends, the maple, fir, and home give rests. A lot of this book is the struggle between leaving the island and learning to love this Western sky that I live in, but not this one. This is just a poem of autumn and adulthood. Betrayal in hunting season. There is a smell of apples in the air, and the tamarack, the one you planted, has sprouted yellow. Autumn is inside me, with colors going sepia, orange and rust stolen by her kisses. Did she taste of honey and berries? Certainly not apricots. Leave me those. The smells of apples in the air and your reflection on water, a leaf floats where your heart should be. Bringing back your hand in mine. walking over a leaf mosaic in our step. Was her touch as soft as our step was then? The smell of apples in the air brought your breath at my nape, where the hairs escaped my ponytail, and you whispered, you and me. Autumn has returned, promising snow to erase the smell of apples. I forgot to put my timer, so somebody, Jan, go like this. I can see you when I go over time. I would like to read now some points from a new work that I'm working on right now, that I'm having a really fun time. In this world, but an early version of my world, I was an ornithologist. And so I started writing this group of poems that are only about birds. Well, sort of. Brewers or grackle. Euphagus cynocephalus or Quisacalus niger. I'm always home, but wistfulness follows me as the tail feathers of a bird, a brewer's blackbird. They cluster on the wooden broken fence near our reeds, males with their curious yellow eyes. They seem to shift the love's crevices inside of me. Their iridescent heads, that purple shimmer, an oil-stained green takes me back to a childhood of tropical rain, ficus trees, and a plaza filled with the chinchilling song of his cousin, an ecological equivalent, the Antenial grackle. Could I beg for a similar fortune? If my wish were granted, my child will run unabashed after that long-tailed chango, the perfect name for a silly bird that shows off his large family, a gatherer full of mischief. But the grackle is not here in this colder climate. Here, the aloof brewers, secretive but for his singing, his own cacophonous songs to his immediate brood. I can sense he doesn't feel the loss of home. Unlike me, home is home. Where the nest rests is twiggy cup near brothers and sisters, a loose colony of familiar ancestry, my jealousy, at least for this summer, for this breeding season. How am I doing with time? Good. Okay, so this one is half-baked, and I like to try a new half-baked poem on you guys. It's called, it's a true story of a gannet. A gannet is a bird that looks like a fruit, it's a seabird that looks like a blue-footed booby. And I just wanted to say booby, haha. Anyway, a gannet named Nigel. Morris Serator. Should I be sad for Nigel? Maybe bellow his loss. After all, he loved a cement gannet for all of his life. She was a decoy, a lure to bring more of his kind. And yet, for years, he was faithful. He gave her fish and renovated their nest. She was everything for him season after season. His silent companion on an empty, rocky shore. While her paint faded and no other gannets met, he waited by her side for the sound of hers and others. Was he some different then in this void? Did he sing his throaty vibrato, or did he wait to be far at sea to screech? I don't know these things, but I know something about his seclusion. Too afraid to venture far, now I live with decoys, images that talk inside of boxes, where I share a few fragments in the safety of those flat screens. Like Nigel, I feed my solitude the best I can, trying to find faith in a setting sun, while I cling to this hope, a world full of gannets and their full sun. Okay, do I have time for one more?
If it's a short one, we want to make sure that the other, yes.
Okay, it's a very short one. It's house wren. To have so much in common with a brown bird, especially now during this pandemic. She and I are cave dwellers, troglodytes that gnaw at seas, insects, and time. She awaits her brood to grow and fly away, while I long for my children to return to play in this garden and forage. We bide our lives in the same meadow. She is a gifted songster that gurgles and stutters, while my voice rises in bursts of silent loneliness. We let each other share this side-by-side communion. Her black eyes, I my own, as I near her wooden house. Over the fence of my garden, her tail cocks a wave. I say hello with 2 fingers at my temple. The grace between neighbors. As I nibble an apricot, she feasts on a moth. We dream of company soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amelia. The smell of apples in the air, I thought maybe you were in Tieton with me for a minute. It was very beautiful. Moving on to our next author, Jennifer Perrine. We are going to welcome you. She is the author of 4 award-winning books of poetry. Again, The Body is No Machine, The Human Zoo, and No Confession, No Mass. Their recent short stories and essays appear in Buckman Journal and the Gay and Lesbian Review. Purine lives in Portland, Oregon, where they co-host the Insight Queer Writers Read series and teach creative writing and anti-oppression practices to youth and adults. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. And thanks everybody, especially those of you who have been in classes all day and are here for the reading too. I appreciate you showing up. I'm going to read a couple of poems from the book that was published by Airlie and then a couple of newer poems. The book from Airlie is Again, and it was written in 2017 in the first 100 days after the inauguration of our previous US president. And each poem in the book takes its title from a word that that president either overused or misused in some way. So the first poem I'm going to read is Build, and I'm excited that this poem is going to be reprinted in the Nambono anthology, which is coming out from Sundress Publications this fall. It's a book of speculative poetry by Black and Indigenous and poets of color. So this is Build. They built a bower. We were not allowed to rest in its shade. We built a tower that loomed over their crops. Sun-starved, they built a machine, planted it in our fields, painted it green so we would not see it snatching our feasts from beneath our feet. We built a God that hooked its jaws through their children. They built a new universe. We watched them go, built gardens in their ruins. We grew restless, built a rocket. Inside, we travel across galaxies looking for their land. We build each day new ways to make them come home. We build up our hopes that this time they'll stay. And then the other poem I'm going to read from the book is Mess. In the class I was facilitating earlier today on ordering a poetry manuscript and assembling it. Folks just kept referring to their manuscripts as messy. And so we were talking a little bit about embracing the mess in order to get to the order. And I thought this poem, Word 12, is an example of that, because it's the one poem in the book that looks super orderly. It's got this nice grid design. But it's about mess. Who served us? Who placed the dish, stirred the pap that clung to our lips? Who spilled the wine on the floor? Who called out for more as we chewed the fat, skipped from one thought to the next, slipped our tongues in the mouths of friends? We did not plan for how the meal would end. We jarred teeth loose on bread. We gnashed and gnawed. We mashed fists on flesh to no touch. We could not help but give in to such fetes. What lush digs, what land of rose and milk. Who doled out this fare, each course lapped from the bowl we shared? Who was it we once dined with in this hall where we passed the plate licked clean? And then I'll read a couple of poems that were written earlier this year. This morning, I got to take a class with Chingy Chen on Haibun, which was great because I feel like I have a whole new sense of the possibilities of that relationship between prose and haiku. But I was writing some Haibun earlier this year, and I thought I'd read one of those. So this is called Haibun in Which a Small Thing Dies. In the front yard, no hummingbirds dart to the flame-painted glass feeder, drained of its sugar, only a few beads of water clinging to its interior. No crows today either, not even one angling for the raspberries, newly flushed into a bruised pink, swollen rubies that wait to be gathered and drenched in the sink. The house is hushed this morning, and cold, the sun still not high enough to strike the windows, to soak this kitchen with light. A crow arrives after all, chases a vole from one side of the gravel drive to the other, its beak piercing over and over, though the furred brown tuft runs and runs. In the hall closet, there is a broom to shoo the bird away, an old shoebox in which to place the vole's remains. There are traps for the field mice that, in winter, wander into the house for warmth. There's a tool chest that's always kept locked, but today your key rests on its dusty top, impossible to ignore. Inside, dozens of empty bottles, cloaked in brown paper, nest in each drawer. And then I'll just read one more poem. If you were at the faculty and scholar reading last night, I was talking about the series of poems I was writing earlier this year that have both an acrostic and telestic in them. Where the acrostic is a title of an 80s song, the telestic is a phrase from that song, and then the title is a lyric. So this, and I apologize if this song gets stuck in your head now, but the acrostic running down the left side is One Night in Bangkok. The telestic is Tea, Girls, Warm, Sweet, and the title is A Little Flesh, A Little History. On my first visit with my partner's family, one uncle offers an offhand comment, noting with a wink how many girls he's met on business trips to Thailand, every massage ending with a little extra for those who could pay. I can't tell if this nostalgia nags at him or if he's mentioned this purely to put me in my place. I keep forgetting I have a race, but of course I learned early on the street, at the mall, once in the library. I got asked while holding my white father's hand where we met, if I was a mail order honey, a pretty young thing brought back from the war. In those small towns where I grew into a teen, I needed to do nothing to be seen as every man's imported dream. a spray of orchids in my hair, trill of a bamboo flute for them to follow, no matter where I went, the image, the soundtrack played over me, as if I were a body in an anatomy text, transparent, acetate printed, tinted, each layer a gateway to shape the barest bones into a woman's form, nude or naked, depending on who was doing the looking. All those inquisitors got it wrong. I was never anyone's mistress or bride. If I knelt, if I took the deep bow, kowtow once meant respect. If I knock my head to the ground, perhaps this is reverence or rage. If I was always wise beyond my years, looked grown for my age, keep guessing my price, the cost of a country, a whole continent, owned and lost. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Your words are very powerful. And I love what you said, embrace the mess. Yes, all of it. We have one more author, Brittney Corrigan. She's the author of poetry collections, Daughters, Breaking Navigation, and 40 Weeks, Solastalgia, a collection of poems about climate change, extinction, and the Anthropocene age, is forthcoming from Jack Leg Press in 2022. Brittney was raised in Colorado and has lived in Portland, Oregon for the past 3 decades, where she is an alumna and employee of Reed College. She is currently at work on her first short story collection. Welcome, Brittney.
Thank you. I'll reiterate my thanks to all of you for coming and joining us in between things on a very long day. I'm very glad that you're all here. I'm going to read you from 3 different books with very different themes, but I like to have a thread that runs through my readings. And so tonight's thread is stars and outer space. So you can look for them in the poems. I'm going to read you one poem from Daughters, which is the collection just out from Airlie Press, and it's all persona poems in the voices of daughters from various folks from mythology, folklore, popular culture, and otherwise. I'm going to start with Astronaut's Daughter. First, you must understand how small we really are, how the intricate world beneath our skins is but a blip, like that waking moment when dreams disintegrate to debris. Even the scale of our destruction is minute, our genocides, our wars, our extinctions and erosions, our ability to change the very atmosphere we're in, melt glaciers, conjure hurricanes and heat. It's all just a speck from out there in the cold and black, out among the whirling gaseous spheres caught in their orbital spins, out among the burning bodies of stars bombarding us with ancient light. My mother knows there is a universe inside her, thousands of possibilities for the formation of life, improbability of collision, rapidity of expansion, tethered floating in a weightless world. And yet she has left me her little planet, I who cannot escape my elliptical love for her, to travel so far above the earth that I am but atoms among atoms, bumping up against dark matter in my fitful sleep. But my heart is telescopic. I look up and the stars could be street lamps, the moon a sliver of melon she's sliced for my plate. I believe that my longing's gravitational. I imagine she can feel it from space. All right, I'm gonna give you another kind of astronaut now. This is from my little chapbook Breaking, which is all poems that were in response to events in the news over the past several years. So this one was written for the first all-female spacewalk outside the International Space Station that happened on October 19th, 2019. Astro Sisters. On the earth that passes beneath, leaves brighten nova-like in the cooling air, and young girls ready their costumes for Halloween. Growing bones step into flight suits with embroidered names. Transparent globes frame buoyant faces freckled with stars. Miles above, two women navigate the space station in weightless calm, their voices tethered to the woman in mission control who talks them through each task, each measured